Pardon me, do you have any gray poop on? Welcome to the Warrior Workshop. My name is Mr. Rodaway, and you're here at Fox High School for another one of our project/technique videos. The technique that we have just covered with the students is how to do edge-to-edge board glue up, similar to what you see in this cutting board or wooden mouse pad, whatever you want to use it for. This is what we're going to be doing with the students because we want to, again, avoid just practicing a technique and throwing it away in the firewood bin because, again, we do enough of that already. So why not come up with a project that they can use and practice before they get onto their tables or doors or other projects that do require panel glue-ups. Traditionally, cutting boards are end grain. It's a little bit easier on the knives, a little bit longer lasting on the cutting boards. Eventually we'll get to making one of those, but right now we're working on a project video for the students. The students get to choose between 3 different sizes in this project. The small size is a 5x8, the medium size is an 8x11, and then in this video, we're gonna make the 11x17, the large size. There is one problem with the 5x8 that we have to think about from a safety standpoint. This is too short for the table saw and joiner to operate through safely or mechanically. So what we're gonna do is have the students partner up on this one. They'll have to come to an agreement on their pattern and then work it as one longer board, maybe 20 inches long, and then separate it down to final 2 8-inch pieces. There are a few parameters that our students have to go by. The boards need to be 1 to 3 inches wide, that way they have to do multiple. There is an exception for 3/4 inch wide pieces for some of the advanced students. They have to have instructor approval to go down to that small. It's just for safety reasons. They also have to have at least 3 pieces, maximum of 5 on the small and the medium. They need to have at least 3 pieces, maximum of 7 on the large one. Now, remember, the more seams means more glue ups, more cutting, but the projects look cooler in my opinion. Where are you going to come up with this design? Hey, there's this thing called Google. Look at other cutting board images, Facebook groups that are cutting board enthusiasts. Yeah, they're out there. They're crazy. They're awesome. It's really cool. We had a student last year go to the state competition with a herringbone pattern. Took him all semester to make that. We don't have all semester. And again, we're focusing on edge-to-edge glue up, face grain cutting boards, whatever term you want to use. So let's get started. For those of you that are out there in YouTube land, the students have been given a set of instructions. You on YouTube, if you want to check the description out below or the project descriptions,
a Google Drive link to this.
Students, you're going to see a number, or a step indicator, or a step indicator that follows that worksheet. That way you can follow along as you work on. All right, let's go over our design so we can understand what we're going through here. We are going to have a 7-piece design. It's going to have 2.5-inch strips of walnut on the outside. Then it's going to go in with a 3/4 piece of maple, 2 2-inch strips of cherry, again separated by another 3/4 inch piece of maple. Kind of have a centering symmetrical pattern here. Please use some common sense when it says rough cut 3 to 5 pieces. That does not mean 3 to 5 of these large boards here. You can see that we can get our 2 2.5 strips out of this. We're going to get our 2 2-inch strips of cherry out of that one. And then we're going to get our 3/4 inch strips out of this. This cup come out of the scrap pile or the cutoff pile. And that's kind of what led me to this design is I had the least amount of maple, wanted to make it pop. So let's put multiple strips in there. Remember, more strips means more glue up, more processing time. So just keep that in mind. If you start out with a long piece, you've been given one out of the lumber room, you are going to have to go to the miter saw, obviously, and cut it to the rough length. Our rough length is not the final length. Please be able to differentiate the distance or the difference. It's easier to trim the board to final size after it's all glued and dried, been planer to thickness, then we'll cut it to final size. So these are about 19 to 20 inches long already. If we didn't, we'd use the miter saw to make them that length. Remembering from the table saw unit, you need to have a straight edge before you go to the table saw. Since none of these boards happen to have a straight edge, our first step is going to be over at the joiner. Since we were lucky enough to find these pieces, we can skip the miter saw step. All right, now we're over here at the joiner to take care of our rough edges. If you're unfamiliar with how to use a joiner and you're out there in YouTube land, we do have a full video on how to use the joiner and planer safely and properly. All right, now we're at the table saw step. And we're going to cut these to a couple of the final width, but the two outside pieces we're going to cut a little bit wider because, again, we make our panels a little bit oversized and we'll trim it off to a final whenever it's all glued up. We're going to start with the cherry. Remember, our smooth edge is against the fence. If you're unfamiliar with how to use a table saw, we do have a full video on that, so check it out if you're needing a refresher. One thing for tips and tricks, if you happen to get some burn marks, you can take this piece back to the joiner. Do not sand that because you won't have a perfectly straight edge. That's the point of the joiner to the table saw, is you get a parallel straight edges. So one quick pass in the joiner should take care of those burn marks if you happen to get some. All right, now that we're back from machining our pieces, what we're going to do is play a little game of ring around the rosy here and do a dry fit and get everything together in the pattern that we want. What we're doing is looking for good side up. Don't worry if your thicknesses don't match. That'll be taken care of in the planer step. Okay. So once you get a pattern that you like, first thing you're going to do is take and mark it somehow. Okay, I use a cabinet maker's triangle. You can label it with letters as long as your layout stays the same when you're going back and forth from the machines to the table. What we're also looking for is when I take my hands and just put light pressure or firm pressure like this, that our seams disappear, or at least are seamless. Okay, we've got a couple of these that I'm not pleased with, so what we're going to do is go back to the joiner, take care of that, and we'll be right back. Again, this is where the labeling comes into play. Get everything in position. We want our two outside clamps, in this case our bottom clamps, to be within an inch or two of the edge. The ends don't have to line up perfect, but remember, the more they're offset, the more you've got to cut off to line them up. The last clamp will go on over the top once everything is glued up. So if we're gluing, we want to turn our pieces up on edge. All but the last one, slide it up out of the way. We are going to have a wet rag and obviously our bottle of glue. The wet rag technique is one of those that woodworkers will debate forever and ever, kind of like picking a president, and it'll never be solved. The reason we choose to wash our glue off at the end is because we have to move these cutting boards, because obviously we're a school shop. Make sure your rag is wet enough that your hands, you're having to wipe it on your shirt or use a towel, but it is not dripping across the floor wet. Okay, we don't want it so wet that it dilutes the glue, but we want it wet enough that it doesn't spread the glue. Does that make sense? All right, so this is where it gets messy.
Messy part? What? This kind of looks like the messy part. I'm going to have sawdust in my hair for weeks.
That was Miss Ruppert, who helped us out in one of our other videos on how to make a hand-carved sign. So if you're interested in learning how to do that, our students did those first semester. She was awesome. Check that video out if you're interested in our library. You want good, solid glue coverage. With good, solid glue coverage, I have found that one side is sufficient, plus it's kind of a pain and a mess to do both sides. We want this squeeze out. That way we know we've got good glue coverage. Now before we apply the top clamp, let's get our wet rag out and give it a wash down. In the Warrior Woodshop, due to the number of students, we have to be able to reuse our clamps as often as possible. So we require the students to label their boards with their name, the class hour they're enrolled in, the date they glued the project up, and the approximate time. So this way we can pull the clamps after a 4-hour dry time and let another student use them. All right, after this is sat at least 4 hours to dry, we're going to undo our clamps. Put these away. Remember, we did wash the glue off, but chances are there's still going to be some glue that was underneath the clamps. Left these black marks. We're going to use a wood scraper, and I have found, with better luck, that you just clamp this to the table. And even though this is hand tools, these little pieces of hard glue will fly. What you're looking for is any hard chunks of glue that would chip the planer blades. At this point, we ask our students to have the instructor check. Again, if you did a decent to good job of wiping the glue off with the wet rag, this step a lot of times is very short-lived. So we're going to go ahead and send this 12-inch board through right. Remember, our final's 11. We're still at 12 inches wide. Our final's 17. We're still at about 20 inches long. All right, now that we got our board squared up, cut the final length, the next step is to get it the final width. That's something you want to think about, because this is a symmetrical pattern where this one isn't, is how you're going to make this cut. Right now we're about 1 inch too wide. So if I take all of my material off of one side, it's going to mess up the symmetrical pattern, where something like this, I could take it off of either side, and it's not going to be as noticeable as much as it would be here with the symmetrical versus non-symmetrical. So let's get that calculated and we'll cut it to length, or width, excuse me. Using a safe and approved manner for cross-cutting, square up one end of your cutting board glue up. From the squared up end, measure and mark your cutting board to length, then use a safe and approved cross-cut method to go ahead and make that cut. One of the things I think dresses up a cutting board is getting rid of square edges. So make a shape out of it, make a handle, simply round over the corners. We're going to do the simple round over the corner technique. Just take some sort of jar or a circular object, line it up in the corner, and give it a little round over edge. Do that to all 4 corners and head over to the bandsaw or pull out the jigsaw to make that cut. Use the bandsaw or jigsaw, depending on your design, to cut out your shape. Using the appropriate sander, in this case a belt disc sander, clean up your edges. For inside curves, a spindle sander might be a better choice. Using a router and a router mat, round over or whatever profile design you choose for the outside edges of your cutting board. All right, we're getting there. Another thing you could do is, some people like to put initials, so you could use the same technique that we use in our sign carving project to go ahead and route our initials. And if you're interested in how that's done, check out our other videos on our YouTube library on how to make a hand carved sign. While we're at it, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification so you get other videos when we do post some of our bigger projects. So we're on to final sanding. Make sure you get everything with 100 grit to get rid of the planer marks. And in the Warrior Wood Shop, we allow our students to use the power sanders on the surfaces, but not on the edges, so it doesn't ruin the pad and tear the paper prematurely. So once you get that done with 100, so all the planer marks are gone, you're going to repeat the process with 150 and 220. Now that we're all finished with the sanding, it's time to apply an actual finish. We're not going to use a traditional woodworking polyurethane lacquer clear coat because we're going to have food in contact with these most likely. What you traditionally use is a cutting board oil or a butcher block conditioner. Those are commercially available products. We're just going to use some mineral oil from the pharmacy department. Basically, it's the kind of the active ingredient in cutting board oil. So we have it in bulk, just a little bit easier for us to do large amounts like that. So your choice. We're going to go ahead and just rub it in. Remember that movie, wax on, wax off? Kind of the same principle here. I even think it made a comeback as a TV show this past year. The first coat's going to take a lot more because it's going to soak it in. We're going to let that dry overnight and we'll apply several more coats before we're all said and done. Well, there you have it. That is how we make edge-to-edge or face grain cutting boards in the Warrior Wood Shop. This is an excellent project to both use up your scrap material and go ahead, as we wanted to do, practice doing edge-to-edge glue up. The possibilities are almost endless. The shaping, the size, the color combinations. So be creative with it. Use up some scrap material. Make them as gifts. Again, the possibilities are almost endless. So thanks for watching. If you haven't done so, hit that subscribe button, the bell notification, so you get notified when we do more project videos. All I need now is some summer sausage. Thanks for watching. Now go out and make some sawdust.